Her true story from Florida. My son said, "You ruined our lives, get out." So I just left and cut them off. A week later, I received 99 plus missed calls. "You just moved in and already you're ruining everything." My son's voice ricocheted off the hallway walls, slamming into me. My son's voice, harder than I thought a voice ever could. I hadn't even unzipped my suitcase. He stood in the doorway of the small guest room, if you could even call it that, a converted office with beige carpet and one small window covered by a paper-thin blind. My suitcase was still upright by the wall. The pillowcase smelled like detergent. "Not home because of you," he snapped. "My son doesn't even have his own room anymore. How do you not see the problem here?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again because anything I said would have only made it worse. I had been in the house less than 2 hours. I had just left behind everything I'd ever known: my old house, my garden, my church group. I'd sold the place I had lived in for 34 years, the same place where I watched him take his first steps, where we painted the hallway walls yellow the summer after his father died, where I buried my wedding ring under the rose bush because I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. All of that sold, gone, so I could come live with them, as he once put it, so they could take care of me. Now, after the minor stroke last year and the arthritis that made stairs my enemy, he and his wife had wanted a bigger home, something with a yard space for their 2 kids and maybe a little corner for me, but the truth was they didn't have the money, not even close. So I did what mothers do. I sold my house, cashed in the CD my husband left me, and handed over the down payment. Every cent went toward the purchase of this 2-story in a quiet suburb of Florida, complete with a screened porch, a guest room, and promises, "You'll be part of everything." My son had said when we signed the papers together, "Well, make it work, but promises are cheap when you're not the one paying." Now he stood over me, eyes wide with blame, fury trembling in his fingers. "Why did you even come here, Mom?" he hissed. "This was supposed to be a new start for us. Instead, we're rearranging everything for you. You're not a queen, okay? You're not a queen. Get to just walk in and disrupt our lives." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. I saw the tired lines around his mouth, the resentment in his eyes, and the sheer discomfort of a man forced to make space for someone he didn't expect to live this long. I looked down at my suitcase, my folded sweaters, my worn slippers, my medications lined up in a plastic bag labeled in black marker. I hadn't brought much, but somehow even my presence was too much. His wife, Sarah, hovered by the kitchen doorway. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The silence from her was louder than any insult. I nodded once, not at them, at myself, just to mark the moment, to remember it clearly. "I'll stay out of the way," I said softly. "I'll make it work," he scoffed, turning his back before I'd even finished the sentence. That night, I lay awake on the stiff mattress, listening to the ceiling fan buzz and thrum from the room across the hall. I heard the sound of my grandson crying, a soft, sleepy whimper that made my chest ache. I heard my son mutter something under his breath, followed by the slam of a door. Nobody came to comfort the child. Nobody came to comfort me either. I had moved into a house, but not a home. Everything about the first night confirmed what I didn't want to admit. I had traded the last piece of my independence for the illusion of belonging, and already I was being pushed aside. The next morning, I woke up early. I folded the blankets, unpacked a few things, and tried to make the bed look less like a punishment. In the kitchen, Sarah passed me without a word. The coffee was already made, but not for me. I poured a cup anyway, sat at the edge of the table, and stared at the backyard. My grandson in the grass alone. No toys, just a stick and a plastic bucket. He saw me through the glass and waved. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. By lunch, I'd been asked to use the bathroom downstairs, only it's just easier with the kids running around, and reminded not to use the dishwasher unless I asked first. By dinner, there were only 4 plates on the table, not 5. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. I was not family. I was an obligation, a disruption, an afterthought. I washed my own plate alone. That night, as I changed into my pajamas, I noticed that my suitcase, still half full, had been pushed to the closet. Not by me. They didn't even want to see the reminder of what I'd given up to be here. And so I sat down on the edge of the bed, placed my phone on the nightstand, and opened the small notebook I kept in my purse. It had been meant for grocery lists, blood pressure logs. Instead, I wrote, "Day 1, my name is Evelyn Parker. I sold my house to buy theirs, and today I was told I'm the reason their son has no room." The phone rang at 10:37 a.m. I was in the laundry room folding towels. No one had asked me to fold, trying to feel useful in a house that barely acknowledged I existed. I answered on the second ring. It was a woman from the bank. "Mrs. Evelyn Parker?" "Yes, speaking. This is Marcia with First Federal. I'm just was playing. Calling to confirm your application for a $215,000 Sense home equity loan." Submitted last week. We're just missing a few documents to proceed. I felt my knees go cold. Excuse me, the application to leverage your property. She paused. The house in Orange Grove Lane. You signed the initial authorization, but we still need your tax returns. I didn't sign anything. A long pause. I'm sorry, the woman said, now cautious. I didn't apply for any loan. I repeated, and I never signed anything. Her voice changed, tightened. Ma'am, would you mind confirming your last 4 digits of Social Security? I gave them. There was another pause. I see. In that case, I think you should come in as soon as possible by noon. I was sitting in a small branch office with cold air conditioning and a printout of documents I had never seen before in my life, and there it was, my name, my Social Security number, my address, and a signature that pretended to be mine, but it wasn't. The curve on the P was wrong, the slant was off, and I never used a period after my middle initial. Whoever signed this didn't know that, but I did. I walked out of the bank holding a copy of the forged documents, my hands shaking only slightly, not with fear, with certainty. I knew who had done this, and I knew what I had to do next. That night I helped set the table like always. 4 plates, 2 wine glasses. My grandson played with the tablet while Sarah reheated leftovers. My son came in late, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, already frowning. We sat down to eat. I made lentil stew, Sarah announced as if it were a peace treaty. No one replied. Halfway through dinner, I placed the papers on the table, neat, unfolded, visible. My son looked down at them, then up at me. What's this? You tell me, I said. His eyes scanned the header, then the signature. I watched the muscles in his jaw twitch. I got a call from the bank, I said calmly. Apparently I'm applying for a home equity loan. Silence. I got a call from the bank. Sarah put her spoon down, and it turns out, I continued, that someone forged my name to make it happen. Still, he said nothing. I wonder, I said, who would have had access to my Social Security number, my ID, my trust. My voice was quiet, controlled, surgical. He stood up slowly. What do you want me to say? He snapped. You live here. It's your house. You're part of this family. Part of this family? I echoed. He glared. Don't turn this into some martyr act, Mom. We're struggling, you know that. So you forged my name? I borrowed against the house. Our house. You forged my name. He slammed his fist on the table. The spoon jumped. My grandson flinched. You don't understand what it's like, he shouted. We're drowning here. Sarah's job is unstable. My credit's shot. And you, I waited. You sit here folding towels and judging us. I blinked. Everything was fine until you moved in. The rage cracked out of him like lightning. You ruined our lives. Get out. The words cut through the room like a blade. I stood slowly. Sarah reached for his arm. Mark, stop. He yanked it away. If the only thing you have left to offer is a loan you can't even give. I stand slowly. He spat. Then maybe it would be better if you just died already. The room went silent. Even the boy stopped breathing. And then I saw it, something he didn't expect. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small black recorder. I pressed stop. The blinking red light went still. What's that? He asked, panicked. Now I tucked it back into my sweater. Proof, I said. He stared at me, his face contorting into something I'd barely recognized. You recorded me? Yes. Why? Because I'm not stupid. And this time I needed the world to believe me. Sarah backed away slowly, her face pale. I'll go, I said, tonight if necessary. He scoffed. Good, pack your things. I nodded, but this time I smiled. Good, pack your things. Not out of joy or bitterness, but out of clarity, because I finally knew I wasn't the one who had failed this family. They had failed me, and now they'd finally see what happens when a woman they thought was powerless stopped protecting them. They didn't ask me to leave that night. They just made it very clear I was no longer welcome. The next morning the coffee machine was already brewing when I came into the kitchen, but no extra cup had been left out for me. When I reached for the cabinet to get a mug, Sarah blocked it with her hip, pretending to organize the shelf. Let me just get through this real quick, she said. Without looking at me, I waited 10 minutes. She never moved that afternoon. The remote control disappeared from the living room. My favorite blanket was accidentally donated to Goodwill. My vitamins were misplaced, then replaced with cheaper generic versions that gave me nausea. By the third day, my access to the kitchen was officially revoked. It's just easier if we streamline meal prep, Sarah said, eyes glued to her phone. So I ate cereal from a plastic bowl in my room. At night, I heard whispers from the master bedroom, sometimes angry, sometimes tired. Once the door cracked open, and I caught Sarah's voice, quiet but sharp. How long do you think she's got left? A year, 2 at most. A pause. I mean, she's already done enough damage. The door closed. My heart didn't break, it calcified. That the door closed Night I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. The next day I walked 3 blocks to the drugstore and bought a mini voice recorder. Small discreet voice activated. It fit in my coat pocket like a secret. They had taught me to be invisible. Now I would use it. The first time I used it was accidental. I was sitting at the dining room table reading a magazine I'd salvaged from the recycling when Mark walked in on the phone with someone, his tone sharp, urgent. No, I said, use her name again, he snapped. She doesn't check her credit. She barely knows how to use the internet. Just use the same signature. It worked last time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He didn't see the recorder tucked inside my knitting bag, blinking silently. When he walked out, I hit stop. That night I played the recording back 3 times. Every syllable tightened something in my chest. I thought of the child I had once bathed in a plastic tub, held through fevers, taught to ride a bike on the gravel road behind our first home. Now he was using my identity like a stolen credit card. I bought a second recorder the next day just in case the first failed. I started keeping a log. Morning, Sarah tells kids not to talk to me because grandma's grumpy and mean. Afternoon, Mark slams door after phone call, mutters, useless old woman. Evening, they order takeout. And don't knock on my door. I wasn't collecting evidence for a court. I was collecting it for me, so no one, not even my own guilt, could convince me later that I'd imagined it all. On the 7th night, I played a clip while sitting on the floor back against the closet wall. Sarah's voice filled the room, high-clipped, annoyed. She just takes up space. What does she even do all day? Breathe and judge us. Mark laughed. Trust me, the moment she's gone, everything will finally run smoothly. This house feels like a coffin with her in it. The silence that followed was worse than the words. They weren't even angry. They were comfortable hating me. The silence that followed. Didn't cry because I was hurt. I cried because it made everything clear. This wasn't a bad week or a tough transition. This wasn't about stress or misunderstandings or generational conflict. They didn't love me. They tolerated me, resented me, used me, and now I had proof. The next morning I smiled when I passed them in the hallway, not because I'd forgiven them, because I'd decided something. If I was invisible, then they wouldn't see me coming. The file was in the bottom drawer of my suitcase, a battered manila folder with a rubber band around it, and my husband's handwriting fading on the corner. House docs, do not throw out. I hadn't opened it in over a year. That morning, after another breakfast alone, I sat on the floor of the guest room with the folder spread out before me. The pages were yellowed slightly from age, but they were intact. Deed, title, tax receipts, insurance forms, and there it was in bold: owner of record Evelyn M. Parker. No cosigner, no joint ownership, no transfer of title. This house was still mine, not in theory, not in some sentimental maternal sense, legally, fully, unmistakably. No transfer of title. Stared at the document for a long time. They thought I had signed it over after the move. I hadn't. There had been talk of it months ago when we were still planning the transition, when Sarah sat beside me on the couch with a polite smile and a printout of real estate options, when Mark had said, it'll just be easier if the house is under our names, mom, tax-wise, insurance-wise, less to worry about later. I told them I would. I almost did, but the paperwork required new homeowner insurance under their names, and my age gave us a better premium, so we postponed and then forgot, or at least they did. I never signed anything, and now I was glad, so deeply, painfully glad that I hadn't. Because this house, the one they used to whisper about getting rid of her in, the one I was confined in like an aging prisoner, it was mine, paid for with my name, my savings, and my sacrifices. They didn't own the roof over their heads. They were guests in my home, and they didn't even know it. I sat quietly with that realization all afternoon, not triumphant, not angry, just still. Power, when it returns to your hands after years of being told you have none, is not loud. It is quiet, heavy, and deliberate. That evening, while Mark and Sarah bickered in the driveway over forgotten milk, I made a call. Is this Thomas Hargrove's office? I asked the woman on the line. Yes. May I ask who's calling? This is Evelyn Parker, I said. Tom handled my husband's estate. I'd like to speak to him directly. The woman paused. Of course, Mrs. Parker. One moment, a click, then a soft, familiar voice. Evelyn, he said. Good Lord, it's been a while. Too long, I replied. We hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years, not since my husband passed, and Tom helped me navigate the insurance claims and the quiet chaos of widowhood. How can I help? I need to discuss a property mine. It's complicated. I'm listening. I explained everything slowly. I'm listening carefully. I told him about the sale of my old house, the down payment, the joint mortgage taken under my name alone, the promises I had made and never legally fulfilled. and what I had discovered, and what they had done. Tom was silent for a beat too long. Then I'll be in town Friday. I can stop by with a notary. We'll review everything. Thank you, I said. No need, he replied. You're not the first mother I've heard this from, but you might be the first one doing something about it. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. Something had shifted deep inside me, not rage, not grief, resolve. They had thought I was too old, too soft, too tired to keep track of papers or laws or signatures. They had forgotten I was once the woman who balanced 2 jobs and still made dinner by 6:30 every night. They had underestimated the woman who taught their son how to walk without falling. Now I would teach them something else, how to fall without knowing what hit. Some women raised their voices. Some women raised their voices. I raised my eyebrows. My children, and now, quietly, my defenses. The morning after speaking with Tom, my husband's old lawyer, I went to the credit union downtown, a place no one in this house ever thought to ask about. I opened a new checking account under my maiden name using a PO box I'd rented. That same morning, I transferred a portion of my retirement savings into it quietly, cleanly. No one noticed. That same week, I began slowly removing things from the house, not the big items, not yet, but the meaningful ones. My husband's cufflinks from the top drawer of my jewelry box, the heirloom locket from behind the old sewing machine, the antique pie dish my mother gave me before she died. Little by little, they disappeared from the shelves and drawers and reappeared in a small storage unit I rented 2 towns over. Sarah thought she was slowly erasing me from the house. I was simply returning the favor. The next step was the bank. I filed a formal fraud complaint for the forged documents. The woman who took my statement had kind eyes but didn't say I filed a formal fraud complaint. Much I could tell she'd seen this before. Family, she murmured, shaking her head. Sometimes the worst ones are the ones we raise ourselves. I submitted copies of the forged signature, old handwriting samples, and a log of the calls and threats I'd recorded. That night I played back one of the recordings while I folded laundry alone. Mark's voice came through low and sharp. If she just died already, we wouldn't have to deal with all this. The silence afterward wasn't Sarah disagreeing, it was her agreeing. Without saying a word, I saved the file to a USB drive, labeled it in red ink. If I died too soon, play this. Then I made 3 copies. One went to Tom, my lawyer, onto my safety deposit box, and one stayed in the lining of my coat next to my heart. Tom began the paperwork a few days later. The first thing he filed was a cease and desist to the lending company processing the forged mortgage. That alone sent Mark's plan into a spiral. He followed up with a formal affidavit asserting my sole ownership of the property. Then he drafted an emergency will, not because I was sick, but because it was clear they were hoping I would be the new will. Was simple. If I passed, naturally my assets would go to a list of charities, including a women's shelter I used to volunteer for, and the local library that still had my name on a plaque in the children's section. Mark and Sarah, they were excluded explicitly, and should anything happen to me under suspicious circumstances, Tom had full authority to release the recordings and pursue criminal charges. He didn't ask if I wanted to press charges for the forged loan, not yet. He knew better than to assume I was done. Every step I took was calculated. Every smile I gave at the dinner table, every thank you dear when Sarah handed me a reheated bowl of soup, every time I nodded as if I didn't hear their whispered contempt from the hallway. They thought I was shrinking, but I was only retreating to get a better view, and from where I sat I saw the truth. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They thought age made me easy to erase, but age only made me sharper than the knife Sarah nearly handed me blade first one morning, sharper than the silence Mark wore like armor around his guilt, sharper than the betrayal they never expected me to survive. But I did more than survive. I planned, and every plan I made, every document signed, every file backed up, every thread pulled from the web they wrapped me in was one stitch closer to freedom, not escape, reclamation. Because this wasn't just about getting out. It happened on a Wednesday, was about getting everything they thought they could steal from me and taking it back with interest. It happened on a Wednesday. The morning air was still soft with dew when the moving van pulled into the driveway, silent, discreet as requested. The driver, a young man with arms full of tattoos and eyes that looked like they'd seen their share of secrets, tipped his cap and said nothing, just how I liked it. By 7 o'clock the hallway closet was empty. By 8:15 my suitcases were zipped, stacked and locked. By 9 o'clock the last photograph of my husband had been gently wrapped in bubble wrap and placed in the front seat of the car that came to pick me up. I didn't say goodbye, not because I was angry, because I was done. I had watched This house go from a promise to a prison. Now it was just a place I used to live. Mark and Sarah weren't home. They had gone out early to meet a financial advisor, likely trying to salvage the crumbling pieces of their plan. I didn't need them to be present for the finale. They'd get the message soon enough. I placed a wooden box on the kitchen table. It wasn't big, but it carried more weight than any of them could imagine. Inside, a printed copy of the deed listing me as sole owner, the formal withdrawal of my initial promise to transfer, the bank fraud complaint report complete with forged signatures and timestamps, 2 USB drives labeled map draw files. Mark and Sarah, one contained the recordings, the other was just a backup, and finally a letter neatly typed and signed in blue. By noon I was stepping into ink. To whom it may concern, this house no longer belongs to you. It never did. I left the box right in the middle of the table next to a cold pot of coffee and a stack of unpaid bills. The silence of the house didn't mourn my departure. It sighed in relief. By noon I was stepping into my new home, a furnished apartment on the 12th floor of a senior living community overlooking the river. Modern, quiet, and warm in ways that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The front desk clerk handed me my keys, smiled, and said, "Welcome home, Mrs. Parker." For the first time in years I believed it. Everything had already been paid in advance: 12 months of rent, health services, dining credits. My name was on every document, my signature unforced and free. The apartment smelled like lavender. The armchair by the window was soft and deep. There was no one here to shout, no one to question why I needed space or silence or dignity, only me, and that at last was enough. That night I sat by the apartment smelled like lavender window with a cup of chamomile tea. Below, the city lights flickered like fireflies. I imagined the moment they'd walk through the front door, expecting the same bitter old woman warming their couch, folding their towels, sitting quietly in her corner. Instead they'd find nothing but empty drawers, hollow closets, and a box that didn't shout. It proved I didn't run away. I took back what was mine, and I left only what they had earned: silence, consequence, and a deep echoing absence. Where their free ride used to be. It started on the 7th day, 1 missed call, then 2 by the 7th day, noon, a dozen. By the next morning my phone screen was a wall of red notifications, 99 plus missed calls. Mark, no voicemails, just silence trying to claw its way back into my life. I didn't answer. I didn't block him either. Some things are meant to be seen and felt. Let him stare at that glowing name. Let his thumb hover over the call button again and again. Let the weight of being ignored settle into his gut the way his words once settled into mine like stones. I had nothing left to give him, and now he had everything to lose. On the 8th day a letter arrived, not handwritten, not personal, a typed notice from the law. The 8th day office handling the credit fraud case. Sarah's name was listed on the formal complaint. Apparently she had been the one to file the paperwork using my information. Her employer, when informed of the federal investigation, placed her on immediate leave. By the end of the week she was unemployed. I didn't gloat. Actions have consequences. Didn't cheer, but I did feel calm. Actions have consequences, especially when the person you called useless keeps the receipts. The calls didn't stop. Mark tried different numbers, texted things like, "We need to talk." It was never meant to go that far. We're in over our heads. Please. One message simply read, "I'm sorry, Mom." But he wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he lost control. And I had no intention of handing it back. I crafted my reply carefully. I didn't send it immediately. I waited until I could reread it without trembling, until the words didn't sting my tongue. Then I attached an audio file, one of the recordings where he said, plain as day, "If she'd just died already, this would be so much easier." And beneath that I typed a single message: "You were once the child I loved most." I typed a single message. "But the man you've become, I don't recognize him." I hit send, then I muted the thread. 2 days later I received a voicemail. Mark's voice cracked at the edges. "Mom, please just tell me you're okay. I didn't mean what I said. We were stressed. I was scared. I shouldn't have forged your name. I know it now. I just silence. I didn't think you'd really leave. That was the problem, wasn't it? They never thought I would leave, because they never thought I could. To them I was a fixture, a faucet that poured money, patience, and presence without ever drying up. A mother is not supposed to walk away, but I did not, out of spite, out of survival, and he would have to learn that lesson without me. That evening I sat on the balcony of my new home with a blanket over my knees and a glass of water resting on the table beside me. The sun dipped behind the skyline, casting gold across the rooftops. Peaceful. Earned. A neighbor waved from the balcony next This life, this silence. Door, she was reading a mystery novel and had her cat on her lap. I smiled, because this life, this silence, this freedom was mine now, not borrowed, not begged for mine, and I would not trade it again, not for guilt, not for apology, not even for the boy I once sang to sleep. Some doors once shut should stay that way. Some mornings now I forget what sorrow used to taste like. There's a citrus tree outside my window that blooms even in winter. I sip my coffee and listen to the birds bickering over crumbs, and I marvel, not at the silence but at the absence of weight, that invisible weight I carried for decades, the guilt, the hesitation, the quiet ache of being needed and never thanked. I used to believe motherhood meant erasing yourself, that the best mother was the one who became heir everywhere and nowhere, holding up everyone else but never seen. I don't believe that anymore. After I moved into the senior residence, I gave myself a small promise to say yes more. I said yes. I said yes to watercolor classes, yes to poetry readings at the local library, yes to a weekend bus trip to Savannah where I ate shrimp and grits by the harbor and danced barefoot on a balcony with women who had stopped asking permission to be joyful. It wasn't long before I had a drawer full of brochures: Greece, Portugal, Montana, Japan. I didn't care if my knees ached or if I needed to pack extra pills. I had time, I had savings, and for the first time in my life I had no one, women over 60, waiting to tell me I couldn't. I joined a travel group for women over 60, Golden Miles they called it. There were 10 of us on that first trip, all in wide-brimmed hats and orthopedic shoes, but we were not delicate, we were fierce. We laughed like teenagers on the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast. We whispered old secrets under the cherry blossoms in Kyoto, and we cried quietly together at the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, not because we were sad women but because we were alive women. Every morning I woke up somewhere new. I reminded myself I am not a ghost, I am not a burden, I am not waiting to die. I'm living, and I'm finally doing it for me. On a cruise through the Danube I met, on a cruise, a man named Samuel. He was from Maine, widowed like me, polite in the way old men used to be, pulling out chairs saying ma'am but with a quiet sadness behind his jokes. We ended up seated beside each other at dinner. I asked if he wanted the last roll. He said, only if you'll take half. And somehow that's how it began, not with sparks or sweeping gestures but with gentle consideration. He told me about his wife, gone 10 years now, about the daughter he raised alone who now lived too far and called too little. I told him about Mark, but only a letter, some parts, the ones that didn't leave bruises. Samuel didn't ask for more than I offered, and I loved him for that. By the end of the cruise we'd spent every breakfast side by side. We read books on the same bench, shared dessert, held hands under the stars. It wasn't a love that consumed, it was a love that steadied. When we got back we didn't promise forever, just that we'd write and maybe travel again, but that was enough, more than I ever expected. One afternoon back in Florida a letter came. It was from Jean again, the friend who had first told me about Mark's divorce. Inside was a smaller envelope, sealed. I opened it and found a handwritten note. Dearest Evelyn, Mark came by, said he wanted your address. I didn't give it to him, but I told him something else. Your mother is doing better than I've ever seen her. He looked like someone just told him the sun would never rise again. Just thought you'd like to know. Love, Jean. I didn't laugh. I didn't laugh. Didn't cry. I simply sat with it, that knowledge, that shift. He had lost access to the one person who had always believed he could be more, and now I no longer needed him to be. I spend my days now painting more, poor but happily. My roses still look like red cabbages. My clouds sometimes resemble potatoes, but they make me laugh. I've picked up French again just for fun. I've started baking. Permission and kindness. True kindness is never owed. It's given freely, and it can be taken back when it's abused. So if you're watching this and you're carrying if you're watching this story inside of you, a betrayal you've never spoken aloud, a sacrifice they never thanked you for, a moment where someone you love deeply chose to forget your humanity, know this: it's never too late to speak, to remember, to reclaim, to start again, not as who you were for them, but as who you've always been for yourself. You are not just a mother, not just a grandmother, not just the extra at the table. You are the main character, the keeper of stories, the witness of truth. And when you speak, the world finally listens. Subscribe to Grandpa True Stories, because here we don't whisper the truth anymore. We remember it, we speak it, and we live what's left with fierce, undeniable grace. Revenge has no expiration date, and neither does dignity. So pull up a chair, turn up the